Hello, guys, and welcome into another episode of the C Team Podcast. I believe this is episode number 16. We're knocking out all of our NFL power rankings. I just did an Atlanta Falcons episode earlier this morning. You noticed that it's just me. I do not have my co-partner Dallas in here with us. He's still battling a brutal work schedule. I've never seen anything like it. But yes, I am Emmitt Sevores. And today we are going to talk about a franchise that I have said a lot about. I have said a lot about the Bears. I think I had them as one of my free agency losers. No, not free agency. I definitely had him as a draft loser for sure. But I'm going to bring someone on in here, to prove me wrong on all of this stuff. And we're going to talk about the Chicago Bears. I'm going to bring in Alex Shapiro. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you, Emmitt. Thanks for having me on, man.
Of course. But yeah, coming up, we're going to talk about some expectations for the Bears. We're going to talk about last season for sure. That's how we're going to start it off. But we're also going to pick his brain on, the Matt Eberflus hire, some of the Bears free agency and draft stuff. He's going to talk about Justin Fields, of course. He's one of the best players on the Bears. And then we're going to get a Bears, record prediction right here at the end. But let's start it off talking about last year. And that's going to be, what went wrong for the Bears last year. It did not wind up, going as well for them as they would have hoped with a rookie quarterback. They go 6-11. What do you think went wrong?
Well, when you take a look back, I think the first thing that went wrong was the decision to not give Justin Fields any first team reps in training camp. That was something that, drew a pretty critical eye at the time because everybody was saying, hey, Justin Fields is the future. We understand that Andy Dalton needs to learn the offense and he's going to be the starter, but to not even make it an open competition and then to not really give Justin Fields that time all during training camp obviously hurt them because guess what? Justin Fields needed to play, and he clearly wasn't ready. So the other thing that went wrong for the Bears is once they made that decision and went down that path of we are giving Andy Dalton every starter rep, essentially, was Andy Dalton getting hurt. Andy Dalton getting hurt was something that went really wrong for the Bears last season. People forget, but in week 2, when he went down with a bone bruise, Andy Dalton was actually playing pretty well. He was having a pretty good first half, and then he hurts himself. Justin Fields come in, and he's not as effective. And then week 3, the offense just wasn't prepared. Matt Nagy wasn't prepared to put an offense around Justin Fields or what. I don't know what happened. But whatever the game plan was for week 3, none of it made any sense for what Justin Fields' strengths were, and it was a historically bad performance. They had something like 19 yards. That's truly, truly awful. So those two things in quick succession, right? Not giving Justin Fields any reps and then Andy Dalton getting hurt, that derailed their Justin Fields plans. Because if Justin Fields spends a lot of time on the bench, learning, growing, and then maybe he goes in week 11, week 12, we might be singing an entirely different tune this year. So when you take a step back and you look, okay, this is the path that they went on, they decided to go down. Those two things really, really went wrong.
Yeah, I know as an outsider, well, not necessarily a huge outsider, but, as a Packers fan, I looked at that and I just had no idea what they were doing. Because, first off, they draft Justin Fields in the first round. I believe he was a top 10 overall pick. I made maybe 11th or 12th. I believe it was
11.
Number 11. So, they take him in the first round. And so automatically, I know as, me, I was not happy. I was like, they got a guy. They got a guy who I think could potentially, turn into one of their best quarterbacks in franchise history. Then, Andy Dalton and then Nick Foles. And I am just, I'm racking my brain. I'm like, what is going on? I had no idea. I think obviously there was some sort of familiarity between, Nick Foles and Matt Nagy, because I believe they had some sort of overlap there in Cincinnati with the Chiefs. But I didn't know exactly what their plan was. Once you said that they went with Andy Dalton and he got hurt, that didn't work out. But throughout the rest of the season, they kept kind of, flip-flopping back and forth between, Justin Fields and but if Andy Dalton's, if Andy Dalton's healthy, Andy Dalton's going to start. But then Andy Dalton doesn't play well, so they take him out and then they put Justin Fields in. It just felt like it was all over the place. Do you think that was something, as we transition a little bit into like Matt Eberflus's hiring, do you think that that was sort of a problem with Matt Nagy throughout his tenure, with the Chicago Bears?
Well, yeah, they never got it right with the quarterback position, and that's what he was brought in here to do, right? He was brought into Chicago primarily to get the offense on track and really to develop Mitchell Trubisky. That was his first charge. Get Mitchell Trubisky to be a franchise quarterback. That clearly didn't work. It just didn't, for whatever reason. I am not here to lay blame. It didn't work. So that is when they brought in Nick Foles. So Nick Foles was brought in to compete with Trubisky last season, and it was Nick Foles who had familiarity with, I believe, John DeFilippo. Foles and Nagy, I don't believe, ever crossed paths before that. But they made the trade, and they say, okay, Foles is going to compete with Trubisky for the job. And Trubisky is on an incredibly short leash. He throws a couple picks in week 3, I want to say. Maybe it was week 4 against the Falcons. In goes Foles. Foles wins some games. You could probably thank the defense for them winning those games, and then it all falls apart. The offensive line wasn't blocking for him. He's not a mobile quarterback, and without good protection, everything, again, crumbled. He gets hurt. Trubisky's back in, then Foles is back in. It was a complete disaster in 2020. So now Foles hasn't worked. They've moved on from Trubisky. Trubisky goes to the Bills. They bring in Andy Dalton to be the starter. Then they draft Justin Fields, right? So Nick Foles was kind of a lame duck last year. Andy Dalton comes in. Could he have been good? I actually do believe he could have been good. It's kind of a hot take. People think I'm crazy for saying that. I think he could have been decent enough for the Bears to win more games last season. And I think overall, if you look at it, there were times when, there are things that Justin Fields does that Andy Dalton simply can't do. The talent disparity is not there. However, there were moments where Andy Dalton come in and get the job done as a pro quarterback that knows what he's doing, that is incredibly experienced, right? So when Andy Dalton got hurt and Justin Fields is thrown in, again, it just doesn't work. Andy Dalton had to leave because of injury, because of a bone bruise, but they never got the quarterback position right under Matt Nagy, and that was really his biggest charge, starting with get Mitchell Trubisky on track. They had 4 shots at it: Trubisky, Foles, Dalton, and then Fields. And really, with all 4 guys, the offense just never came together.
Yeah, and I think, I looked at that, and that's why it made it a little bit surprising to me that they went to Matt Eberflus as the head coach in Chicago. Because at least, on the outside looking in, again, as a Packers fan, the Bears have always had a defense that has been frustrating to go against. I go into the game, and unless it's, one of those very weird games where Rodgers just starts off hot, it's always going to be close enough in the fourth quarter that I'm still, I'm worried about, for a while there, Khalil Mack coming around the corner, or, Julius Peppers, or, insert any, future Hall of Famer off of the Bears defense. Their problem has always been on the offensive side of the ball, again, especially over these past couple of years, starting with Trubisky. Why did they go with Matt Eberflus, and do you like the hire?
I actually do like the hire a lot. In fact, this is a guy that I was talking about a little bit when the hiring process first started. And I think it's because at this point, it wasn't necessarily the Bears need to get an offensive guy or they need to get a defensive guy to play to their strengths. They needed to get a guy who was going to bring in a program and set a culture that was going to stir things up with the Bears. The Bears looked lethargic at times. They looked non-competitive a lot of the time. There were silly mistakes. There were discipline mistakes, penalties that are just unexcusable, right? The fact that a player isn't getting touched down in week 1 and he's not getting touched down in week 18, those are things, it has nothing to do with X's and O's. That's a culture situation. And Matt Eberflus is a culture guy. So he's installed this hits philosophy. He's really big on hits. These are the pillars of his program. Stands for hustle, intensity, taking the ball away and taking care of the ball, and playing smart situational football. So again, they really haven't gotten into X's and O's too much. Yes, they've installed some offense. Yes, they've installed some defense. But a lot of the time up front in Matt Eberflus's early tenure here has been setting up that program of this is how a Chicago Bear is going to play. A Chicago Bear is going to play to the echo of the whistle. A Chicago Bear is going to know exactly what he's doing pre-snap every time, 100 out of 100 times. So he doesn't have to think. He just runs to the football. A Chicago Bear is going to do everything he can to take the ball away on defense and take care of the ball on offense. So again, that's why I'm not as concerned, and clearly the Bears weren't either, about the X's and O's or they got to get an offensive guy versus a defensive guy, because they had so many problems to fix. And here's the one thing. I'll argue against myself a little bit about why it would have been nice to get an offensive guy who also shares those values is, if Luke Getsy, your guy coming from the Green Bay Packers, if the offense looks awesome under Justin Fields, is Luke Getsy going to leave for a head coaching job? And then you're starting back from square one again with Justin Fields. That is a concern. That's a real concern. However, just where the team was at, I think Eberflus and the program he is installing is what the Bears needed.
Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, I think that adding a guy like Eberflus, who I feel like, although I think I was wrong on it. I mean, I heard that he had been hired by the Bears, and I felt like I had heard his name for forever. But then I look, and he's not, one of the oldest guys for sure. You know what I mean? It felt for sure like I was upset when they hired Eberflus because I knew that they had gotten a good one. And I felt like, because with Matt Nagy for a little bit there, I thought, the first year with Trubisky where they won the NFC North and they wound up getting that playoff spot, obviously, double doink and stuff like that. But it never felt like they had completely and totally clicked. It felt like the defense was still the defense of the Bears, but it never felt like the offense got up to that level. But I think that they brought, not saying that Matt Nagy wasn't an adult in the room, but they brought in a guy with Matt Eberflus who is a culture setter, who is going to have that building in tip-top shape for as long as his tenure is there. So it does freak me out a little bit, not too much, but it freaks me out a little bit that the Bears, seem like they know what they're doing. Moving past, they hire Eberflus, then that brings us into free agency. And the Bears, they weren't they weren't active on any of the, the super big name free agents. Their big thing was they let Allen Robinson go, but as I've been informed, it seemed like he wasn't trying for a lot of the year, as a lot of what I had heard from Bears fans, in terms of it didn't look like he was showing a whole lot of effort and kind of, going halfway on routes and stuff like that. What did you think of the Bears free agency as a whole?
Well, to be honest, it seems like the goal of free agency was, again, to get guys who were going to fit this culture, this program that they're setting. It's a lot of guys who are getting a great opportunity for the first time in their careers. Nick Morrow, he has started a little bit in the past. It's a lot of guys who were like backups, and then when they were in, they were great or played well, or guys who, for whatever reason, maybe it's injury or whatever, weren't getting the big contracts. Guys like Nicholas Morrow, guys like Lucas Patrick, another one of your former dudes. Byron Pringle, right? Byron Pringle may not have had the opportunities with the Chiefs because he's behind Tyreek Hill and he's behind Travis Kelce and all of the incredible playmakers in Kansas City. So they're giving a lot of these guys an opportunity, and they're giving a lot of these guys short, small contracts. And it seems like the idea is, especially in a year where they have a ton of dead money, the Bears have a ton of dead money this year. The idea is, let's see which of these guys earns an extension. We're going to give a lot of different players an opportunity. And if 3 of them or 4 of them show they're the real deal and they're exactly what we're looking for, then we'll offer those guys an extension. And then once all of that dead money comes off the books, then we'll be a little bit more active on free agency last year. And I think we're having a different conversation about the Bears free agent class if the Larry Ogunjobi deal doesn't fall apart because he fails his physical. Larry Ogunjobi was going to be a big free agent signing for them, and the 3-technique defensive tackle position is a huge position in Matt Eberflus's defense, right? They need that disruptive guy in the middle of the defensive line. It's the position that DeForest Buckner played. Larry Ogunjobi was going to be that dude, and he could have been a marquee free agent, failed his physical. So, what are you going to do? And that changes the story a little bit. Am I a little bit surprised that they didn't land a wide receiver either in free agency or the draft? Yeah, a little bit. But the wide receiver market was insane. I don't think the Bears better themselves by giving Christian Kirk the contract that he earned. Now you can make a case for DJ Chark, who went to the Lions on a 1-year deal, or other guys. OBJ still out there, Julio Jones still out there. Do you give Julio Jones $8 million and say, come prove it here? Maybe. But I will say that they had a plan. It's clear that they had a plan. They have a valuation for these guys, and they were disciplined. They were disciplined in not overspending and not going beyond what they were comfortable with. If they didn't think a guy was worth X amount of dollars, they weren't going to set themselves farther behind in cap space, because one thing they are set up with a ton of cap space next year. So if, kind of like I was alluding to earlier, if a few of these guys hit, they say, okay, we're giving you a contract extension, we're giving you a contract extension, we're giving you a contract extension, then they're set up pretty well to take some bigger swings in free agency next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think you stated it pretty perfectly in terms of they're not going out and spending a bunch of money to go spend a bunch of money. They're not going to throw, again, the Christian Kirk deal. The Jaguars have been my what I would use the dictionary definition of, they think, free agency, just throw a bunch of money at people and, you should wind up winning. They did it last year. They did it this year. Maybe not as much money last year, but, they still go out and they sign Carlos Hyde. They sign Marvin Jones, and then, rinse, repeat, and they do it again this year. So I think the Bears did a very good job. And I think, again, that was a very good point about the Larry Ogunjobi deal falling through. Because what I think it was a 3-year deal. What was it, around $30-ish million, if I'm not mistaken?
I don't remember, to be honest.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
But
for whatever reason, I want to say it was in the 40 million range, but maybe. I'm going to be honest, I don't remember.
Yeah, no, but it was, I don't know. It was, they picked up a lot of very nice pieces. Lucas Patrick, which you pointed out, he was fantastic. He was never a big time starter on the Packers, but whenever he got his opportunity, he shined. He was basically, if someone goes down, someone call Lucas Patrick and we'll put him in the spot where the guy went down. He's going to be very fantastic for you guys. I know that you picked up a bunch of wide receivers. I've seen as a lot of, you guys signed Equinemius St. Brown, another former Packer. You guys signed David Moore, former Packer, for half a season. Dante Pettis is a guy who, I watched for years at Washington, and you guys picked him up on a, I believe it was just a 1-year deal.
Chris Fink, another guy from the Chiefs. So again, it's just a lot of dudes on prove it deals, and we'll see who proves it.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, playing the odds there with having a bunch of guys on the prove it deals, someone's going to prove it. I thoroughly believe that someone is going to prove it. Then you move into the draft where they did get a wide receiver in Velus Jones Jr. But, what did you think of the Bears draft?
So, yeah, you were railing on it before I got in here. I actually think the Bears did a wonderful job, certainly with their first 2 picks. Now, I, like everyone else, to be honest, I'm surprised they didn't take more swings at the wide receiver position. I thought it was super loaded. I thought there were a lot of guys who could have helped the Bears. They end up with Velus Jones, who is an intriguing prospect, who can affect the game on special teams, is a type of guy that they want on offense, who can stretch the field horizontally, who can stretch the field vertically. They can play around with him and use him kind of as a chess piece. But I think the first 2 picks of Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon are slam dunks because, right, everybody focuses offense. But people forget the Bears' pass defense was atrocious last year. I want to say they were like second to last in yards allowed. They were giving up crazy passer ratings. They were a very bad passing defense. And no matter who they threw out next to Jalen Johnson, that other guy was having a tough time. So pairing Kyler Gordon with Jalen Johnson should shore that up. And Kyler Gordon is earning rave reviews with his ability to pick the ball off. He has experience from Washington, Pac-12. We're both Pac-12 guys. So he's got that Washington experience, and it's like cornerback university over there. Playing in zone defenses, he knows what to do. I would wager he's familiar in zone defenses, and he's got that knack for taking the ball away. And then Jaquan Brisker is a dude who, again, focuses on taking the ball away. He's earned a lot of respect, with praise. He's earned a lot of praise for having the heaviest punch for a peanut punch on the team. That he's just got a knack for knocking the ball out, forced fumbles. And Eddie Jackson, ever since Adrian Amos left for the Bears to the Packers, the Bears have really been looking for a guy to play next to Eddie Jackson. I think Tashawn Gibson did an admirable job, but Tashawn Gibson, kind of had a down year in terms of completion percentage allowed last season. So if Jaquan Brisker can play a really good strong safety to allow Eddie Jackson to be a really good free safety, that'll be amazing. He's also very versatile. You can move him in the box, and he can play kind of that hybrid safety linebacker role where he is a reliable tackler against the run game. So those two guys in the secondary, I think, will have huge impacts for the team, especially as Matt Eberflus installs his version of a cover 2 defense. And again, you can nitpick the back of the draft, but you really want to hit on your top 50 picks. They got 2 top 50 picks, and so far they're earning rave, like I said many times, rave reviews from their coaches and from their teammates. And if those 2 guys can make an impact on defense, I think, Ryan Poles will be giving him a good grade in retrospect for this draft.
Yeah, and I think what makes Kyler Gordon so interesting is that his counterpart, Trent McDuffie, got taken on the first round by the Chiefs. But if you go and you watch some of those games that UW, Kyler Gordon was the guy who was getting his hands on the ball. And is that because he was being targeted more, because Trent McDuffie was more of the lockdown guy, kind of like a Jalen Johnson? Yes, so I think that, we're looking at Kyler Gordon is going to be getting thrown at a lot. And he's very good at getting his hands on the ball. I believe it was the game against Cal last year where he had 2 interceptions, and he was absolutely magnificent.
No, that's an excellent point, right? If Jalen Johnson's the lockdown dude, Kyler Gordon, you imagine, would get targeted more. He's already battle tested because, like you said, he's not the lockdown dude in college who was never getting targeted because he was the lockdown dude. He was the number 2 guy, so he was used to getting targeted a lot because nobody wanted to throw to Trent McDuffie. So in that regard, he's already battle tested. Then they drafted a ton of offensive linemen. But like I said, getting in nitpicking back ends of drafts is really tough. It takes so many years, really, before we can give a fair grade on a draft. So getting into the later, they had like 11 picks in the draft. We don't have to go into all of them, but I think Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon could both be the real deal. And then who knows? Maybe Velus Jones is a guy, right? He has the tools. He's very toolsy. He's very mature. He's 25 years old. So you can kind of like look at that as a double-edged sword. He's 25. So by the time his second contract comes around, he'll be 30. But he's also more mature. He knows a lot about how to play the game. He has that much more experience. So you can kind of look at that both ways, that Velus Jones is 25 years old.
No, I know I've been seeing, the Packers Twitter has had a lot of fun with Velus Jones being 25 years old. And again, I think if he's a good player, it's not going to matter how old he is. You know what I mean? I think especially it's like, sometimes with those younger players, you are going to see a lot of those issues, with maturity and, being able to make sure that they're staying on the field. And I think that Velus Jones, I think he'll wind up being, pretty solid, but only time will tell. Now for, I think the one that I'm most excited to talk about, and that's going to be Justin Fields. Justin Fields, he didn't have the best, and that's probably saying it nicely, rookie season. Whether that was all on him, it was not. Newsflash. But he had a lot of turnovers, but I don't think he was ever really able to find his rhythm, because it always felt kind of like every week, unless Andy Dalton, you knew he was going to be out. It was, he's looking over his shoulder, or metaphorically looking over his shoulder, like, oh, like when am I getting pulled? When am I getting pulled? So I think, what do you think we should be expecting from Justin Fields this year? Obviously, you see a lot of people, it's, the sophomore slump, but it almost felt like he kind of had the freshman slump. So should we be seeing like this second year explosion in a new offensive system with Luke Getsy?
Well, that really wasn't the case, honestly, about him looking over his shoulder. When Matt Nagy said Justin Fields is the starter, he made it clear Justin Fields is the starter. We're not going back. It was an injury thing. At first, I forget what his first injury was, but then he had the ribs thing. The ribs kept him out for a while. Maybe it was the ribs first, ankle second. I forget. But he had 2 injuries, and that's why he was kind of in and out of the lineup. In terms of what to expect this season, we really don't know. I think the offense that they're going to install is going to make life easier for Justin Fields. I think we're going to see more playmaking. We know his deep ball is great. We know he can scramble and gain 20 yards practically at will if things open themselves up for that, right? If he has the opportunity to scramble and get 20 yards and he needs to, he will. But he is a pass-first quarterback, and I think we're going to see a lot more vertical stretching. I think we're going to see a lot of horizontal stretching. We've kind of heard hints and clues that he's been on the move a lot in bootlegs. So I would imagine seeing him out of the pocket a whole lot more than we did last year, which was just mind-boggling. I think everybody was looking at that offense saying, why aren't you getting Justin Fields out of the pocket? It sounds like they're going to do that this year. And then from this Luke Getsy, Kyle Shanahan tree type deal, now they have been reticent to give too many details about what the offense is going to be and say, we're going to build it to the strengths of our offense. And we're going to talk to our players and find out what they do well. And that's how we're going to build our offense. So we don't have too many details, to be honest. I think we're going to see a lot of zone running. I think we're going to see a lot of easy reads, easy throws to make Justin Fields' life easier. And then by making Justin Fields' life easier, if, and this is a big if the protection holds up, hopefully he can build some confidence, build some momentum, because you were right. There were many times where it just looked like he had absolutely no rhythm. He would go on stretches where he would be brilliant. The end of the Steelers game, brilliant. The what could have been a game-tying drive against the 49ers, again, brilliant. I think if the Bears are able to make his life easier, and if enough playmakers are able to make enough plays, we could see a huge step from Justin Fields. But again, like I said, it's contingent on a lot of things. It's contingent on the offensive line. It's contingent on a lot of these unproven guys making plays. And then it's contingent on a first-time offensive coordinator and a first-time play caller, Luke Getsy, making it all work.
Yeah, hearing you say, talk about the reports of a lot of bootlegs, that doesn't surprise me at all. Especially, again, obviously, Luke Getsy was in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. And in 2020, when Aaron Rodgers won, his first of the 2 MVPs that he's won in a row, there was a lot of rollouts in 2020. And I know that it came down a little bit because they weren't as effective in 2021. But in 2020, it felt like you were seeing at least once or twice a drive with Aaron Rodgers rolling out of the pocket. This isn't, breaking news, but Justin Fields is a way better athlete than Aaron Rodgers could hope to be. If you can get him on the move, I think that's really where he's going to be, excelling. Allow him to, suck in the defense, and someone's going to be wide open. And especially, I think Luke Getsy was another one of those guys that I was upset to lose. I felt that we were going to Luke Getsy, I understand your point from earlier, talking about now it kind of sucks because, if they do have a good season, Luke Getsy could potentially wind up being, on the way out, getting, one of those highly coveted like NFL head coaching jobs. But I think that under Luke Getsy, I think we should expect to see a lot better from Justin Fields this year, as opposed to last year, which it felt very out of sync. But, Justin Fields is one of those players that, obviously everyone's going to have their eyes on. Who else would you expect, to kind of that we should look out for if we're watching a Bears game? And that could be, a good thing or a bad thing. It could be, I'm expecting them to take this jump, or they're on the hot seat if they don't start performing.
Yeah, so Justin Fields is the obvious one. We've already spoken about Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker, so I won't go into depth about them. But David Montgomery is a dude I'd have my eye on because I think the Bears are going to be more dedicated and more focused on the run than they have been in the past. And I think this zone running scheme, I think they're going to lean on David Montgomery. So he's a guy where he could be kind of the tone setter. Last year, one of the very first things I wrote at the early onset of the season when nobody knew what the identity of the Bears was, I just put it out there. David Montgomery is the identity of the Chicago Bears. It took the Bears about a month later to figure that out for themselves. He, once again, could really be the identity of that offense. He is a strong runner. He's a kind of as you go, we go type guy. He just runs real hard, pulls everyone along with him, a pump up dude. So he's a guy I'd have my eye on. I would also have my eye on, the tackles. I was waffling between which one. I'll throw them both in there. The tackles. Larry Borum on the left side and Tevin Jenkins on the right side, if that is actually where they stay. So last season, Tevin Jenkins, it was a total wash for him, right? They trade up to draft him. They like his nasty streak. They like the physicality that he plays with. He had primarily played right tackle at Oklahoma State. They move him to the left side. He barely plays there. He plays a few games there at the end of the year once he's healed up from back surgery. Larry Borum also got some reps playing right tackle. They switch him. They switch him this year. They say, Larry, you're all left. Tevin, you're going back to the right side. And it's really a mystery how it's going to turn out. It's a big question mark. I believe each of them have the traits and have the ability to be legit tackles. And if they are, the Bears could be set for 10 years. They could just be totally set on the edges for 10 years if they've hit on each of those guys. And those are Ryan Pace picks. A lot of people ran Ryan Pace out of town. Those are both the Ryan Pace picks, Tevin Jenkins in the second round and Larry Borum in the fifth. So if they found both of their tackles of the future, again, looking back is how we really judge these drafts. They could be totally set for a decade on those two guys, but they're huge question marks. So I will absolutely have my eye on all three of those players, David Montgomery, Larry Borum, and Tevin Jenkins.
What do you think about a guy who I was very surprised when he was taken by the Bears, and that's Cole Kmet. What are your expectations for Cole Kmet?
Mm-hmm. It's again, who I don't know. I couldn't tell you because we don't know enough about this offense yet. But they will need Cole Kmet to take a step forward if they want to take a step forward as an offense. Because right now it's Darnell Mooney and Byron Pringle, Equanimeous St. Brown, Velus Jones. A lot of guys where it's like, who knows? If Cole Kmet can take some of that heat off, it will make life much easier for both Darnell Mooney and for Justin Fields. Now, he improved a whole lot in run blocking last year. He wasn't really known as a run blocker, but he improved significantly. That was something noticeable from week 1 to week 18. That should help him in this zone running scheme, and it should help him kind of leak out, right? If players have to respect his run blocking ability and then bam, he leaks out on the play action pass, that could be devastating, both in the red zone and third and short situations. I don't want to put expectations out because, like I said, I don't really know. But I think the Bears would be happy if he becomes a security blanket on third down, if he becomes a big target in the red zone. He didn't have any touchdowns last year. It's kind of crazy. No touchdowns last season. So if he can become a big target in the red zone and really help on third down and be that kind of dual threat guy where, ooh, I'm blocking psych. Nope. I'm going in the flat and I'm getting an easy 6 yards or whatever it is. That would be a huge, huge boost to the Bears offense alone, because learning to play tight end in the NFL is tough. And for a variety of reasons that aren't all Cole Kmet's fault. It's kind of the theme of the Bears developing their young talent. If things don't go well, it's not necessarily the player's fault. He's had to deal with many, many quarterbacks. He's had to deal with now new head coaches, new offensive coordinators, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll see. We'll see what Cole Kmet brings, but that's another question mark for the Bears offense.
Yeah, and I don't want to just all talk about the all offense. So moving on to the defensive side, I don't think they have as many question marks. But one question mark I do have is about a guy like a Roquan Smith in terms of his contract. I believe he's in the last year of his deal he's playing, and so he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of next year. Have you heard anything in terms of Roquan Smith and contract talks?
No. They're playing that real close to the chest. Roquan Smith himself is playing it very close to the chest. He is a guy who should be a Chicago Bear for a long time now. That's all I know. In terms of that, all I know is Roquan Smith should be a Chicago Bear for his entire career because he really could. He has the ability, he has the talent, he has everything. And it's going to sound hyperbolic, but he has the ability to be the next guy in the line of Lance Briggs, Brian Urlacher, Mike Singletary. Truly, he has that greatness in him where playing linebacker for the Chicago Bears is a legendary thing. It's a hallowed position at Hallis Hall. He fits right in.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. And it's like you see his quotes from like about a month ago or so. When being asked if he wants to be a Bear for life, and he's like, absolutely. I mean, and that truly is one of
Okay,
those
what do you
few.
expect an athlete to say that? Have you ever heard
That's
an
true.
athlete say, how
No,
many times has an athlete gotten that question and be like, I don't care, I'm out of here?
I've heard Aaron Rodgers say some close stuff. I've heard it. Are you going to be here for the future? I don't know, maybe. So I've heard it before, but yes, that linebacker of the Bears is first. It's one of those positions, very similar, obviously not in the same stratosphere, but as like quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, where it is like the position on that team. Like everyone looks to that position on that team. We're winding down here. I just want to get, quickly, you can talk about, your expectations for the team as a whole this year, not necessarily the offense. And then what do you think the Bears record is going to be?
Well, I see you got the Bears at 28 here.
And
I don't think the Bears are going to be a top 10 team, but I also don't think they're going to be a bottom 5 team in the NFL. I mean, the Seattle Seahawks, you think the Seattle Seahawks are going to be better than the Chicago Bears?
And
they don't have a quarterback. They don't got nothing.
And here's my explanation for that. Me and my co-host, we did these collectively, and I would have had the Seahawks around this spot. However, I pulled strings to, I think, he wanted the Lions up a little bit higher too. I pulled my strings to get the Lions down low. He has the Seahawks. He has the Seahawks up higher. I know. But I don't know. Maybe for me there is, I can admit that there may have been a little bit of bias of putting the Bears down here.
I'm just busting your chop.
I don't. No, but yeah, I think the Bears, they have an interesting season ahead of them. I don't think they have one of the hardest schedules. Obviously, as a division, we play the NFC East and we also play the AFC East. So we're not too particularly bad in that position. What I believe the Bears they're playing a third place schedule, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, it's going to be set up for them fairly well in terms of the schedule, and I think that there's plenty of games that they will be able to go in there and steal some games. So what do you have the Bears doing this year?
So I actually, and again, I seem to be the only guy who believes this, but I believe the Bears can improve on their 6-11. So you got to do the weird math now these days.
Right, exactly.
6-11 record that they had last year. Everything went wrong last year, and they were still 6-11 with one of the hardest schedules in the league. The defense should be better under Matt Eberflus. The overall vibe should be better with Matt Eberflus than lame duck Matt Nagy. I don't mean to rag on Matt Nagy. I think he had a good culture. I think the club dub thing worked when they were playing great. But he was always looking for the whys, and they never found the whys. And then for me, after that Browns game, it was just they were toast. When you have a game that bad, it's almost just like it's very hard to recover from a game that bad. They still ended up 6-11. So I think they can improve. The defense should be better. The offense should be better, even without the playmakers, just because nothing worked on offense last year. Absolutely nothing worked on offense. And if they're a little bit more disciplined, if they take the ball away at a better rate, they have a much easier schedule. You're still playing the Lions twice. They're going to split with the Vikings because that's what you do. You split with the Vikings. We're playing the Bears play the Jets and the Giants and the Commanders and you mentioned all these bad teams. The Falcons are no good. They could end up. You want a prediction? How about 8-9? What's 8-9?
8-9.
I've said so on our podcast, the Under Center podcast. I've gone all the way up to 9 wins. The range that I've given is 6-9. For you here today, I'll go 8-9, which is an improvement on last year's 6-11 record. Because they play bad teams, they should be better. 8-9. What are you talking about? 28th in the NFL. Again, am I saying they're a top 10 team? No, I am not saying they're a top 10 team. But are they a bottom 5 team?
And I think that's fair. I think that is fair, but someone has to be 28. And to put a specific number on the stat you were looking for earlier, 47. That's the number of total yards that the Bears had against the Browns. 47 total yards.
Was it 19 passing yards or something?
Let's see.
Is that adjusted for sacks also? Because
I believe,
when
yes.
you
I believe
adjust it for sacks, it gets gross.
Let's see
Like
what we
one
got
passing
here.
yard. I think it was one passing yard with adjusted for sacks.
What one passing yard? Correct. One passing yard. Yeah.
One passing yard. One. One.
I was having a fantastic time during that game. To be quite honest with you, it was glorious. It absolutely was. And you know what? While we have you here, I want to get a Packers record prediction. I have all my my Seahawk friends that I've drilled it into their brains that the Packers are going to be good this year. I haven't touched your brain, so let's hear what we got from you. What do you think about the Packers?
It's funny. I was actually just doing this with a buddy who is a Packer last night. We were looking at the schedule, and there are some tough games. There's the Bills on there. The Buccaneers are on there. But the Packers, even without Devontae Adams, are good. The Packers still have Aaron Rodgers. You want to talk about a defense that should be improved? Oh, my goodness. Did the Packers defense improve in that NFL draft? We'll see. We will see how much they miss Devontae Adams. I mean, dude's the best wide receiver in the NFL. Who's better than, I don't know. Let's just say it. Let's just say Devontae Adams is the best wide receiver in the NFL. If he's not, he's number 2. So that's a loss. I still got him at like 12-4 though. 12-4.
Hey, 12-5. 12-5.
12-5. Ah, you got me again. I'm still living in 2020 where we only play 16 games. 12-5.
Yeah, that's what I have, Matt, too. Especially again, the schedule itself isn't hard. They did get a little bit yikes on some rest. They have a week 14. I think it was a week 14 bye. And so that means that they do not have a bye after the London game in week 5. So they
have a bye after playing in London.
So apparently, from what I've seen, is you get they ask the teams, do you want the bye after the international game? And the Packers said no, we want it late.
Ooh. Hey, rest up for that playoff push, because they know, because just like I said, the Bears are playing the Lions twice. The Packers are going, we play the Vikings twice, and we play the Lions twice, and we play the Bears twice. So we're cashing our ticket to the playoffs, and we want that late bye to get ready for the playoffs. So
exactly.
At least I hope they're at least playing Monday night after London.
Let's see. I had it on here. I don't think they are. I'm like actually quite shocked with how their schedule worked out from a rest perspective. I think there was some sort of graphic, and I really wish I would have saved it. Yeah, they play
last year too. The Bears were one of the unluckiest teams in terms of rest. They almost never had a rest advantage. I think after their bye, they had a team coming off a Thursday night game, so it was essentially a wash. Those things matter. Those things do matter.
From
week 12-5. Should I go 13-4?
Yeah, you can. They've won 13 games in a row for the past 3 years. So
let's keep it rolling. I'm changing on the fly. I'm flip-flopping. 13-4.
13-4. I love to hear it. Hopefully I get a different outcome. Well, hopefully for me, I get a different outcome than what I've gotten the past couple of years. That's been uber frustrating, but I don't know. It's fun to watch. The Bears are going to be fun to watch this year. I truly do. I mean, I'm very grateful that I have Sunday tickets, so I'm able to watch all the games. The Bears are always one of those teams that I do tune in whenever they're playing. One of those games. I think I did watch that Browns Bears game. I think I had it going on my phone as the Packers were playing, if I'm not mistaken. And I was having a grand old time. But Alex, thank you very much for joining us. If there's anything you want to shout out, feel free to go for it.
Follow me on Twitter, Alex Shapiro NBCS. There it is. It's right there. Alex Shapiro NBCS. You can find all of my work at NBCSportsChicago.com. We've also got the My Teams app. If you follow any of our sweet teams in the NBC Peacock umbrella, you'll find them on the My Teams app, and it's a sweet app. And we've got an awesome podcast with our host, Ken Davis. Ken Davis is the man, and my co-conspirator, my partner in crime, Josh Schrock. We've got Eric Strobel on there. That's produced by the great Tony Gill. That is the Under Center podcast. So that was a lot. I threw a lot at you. So Alex Shapiro, NBCS, NBCSportsChicago.com, the My Teams app, the Undercenter podcast.
There we go. For me, as always, at Emmitt Sevores on Instagram and Twitter. Sadly, Dallas is not able to be here, but at Wicklander13 and at Dallas Wick on his social medias. Of course, at the C Team Pod on Instagram and Twitter, and here on YouTube. Alex, once again, thank you very much for joining us. I've had a fantastic time talking Bears. Fantastic time talking Bears for the first time in my life, probably. I can say. I think I really do enjoy it. I've had a good opportunity to meet a whole bunch of different people. I've talked, I've talked to a Texans beat writer. I've talked to some. I think we had a Detroit Lions guy on a couple weeks ago. I've been having fun, meeting all these guys and figuring out that they all, don't love the Packers just as much as I do.
No, the pleasure is all mine. This was a really good time. Thanks again for having me, Emmitt. It was a blast. And you know what? Next time I'm on, I'm getting you a little Walter Payton jersey to put up to cover up that stuff behind. We'll get one. You got two Favres. You got two.
Oh, Favres. I have
one Walter
Favre.
Payton.
I have four Favres.
Oh my
God!
And you've got a Sevores. You've got one of your own.
There's four Favre right there.
Oh my goodness!
He's favorite player of all time. I probably, now that I'm thinking about it, I should have my dad's favorite player, Emmitt Smith, if you couldn't figure that out, up there as well. I'm somehow I wound up a Packers fan with a Cowboys dad for a Cowboy dad, and growing up in Seattle, I'll never know, or I'll never tell. I think is probably the better answer to that. But but I've had such a fantastic time. We will for sure have you on. I'd love to have you on if any week before the Packers played the Bears or after. We could get a nice little reaction afterwards too. But whatever you want to do. But thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time.